everybody. Welcome to Away Games, a Chicago Cubs and baseball podcast hosted by two comedians who live in New York and love the Cubs. I am one of them. My name is Adam Amawala, and pinch hitting for Kevin McCaffrey this week is none other than Ken Schultz. Ken, hello.
Hello, Adam. Happy Go to Hell Jed Hoyer Day.
Yep, every day is Go to Hell Jed Hoyer Day. Much like when you're a kid and you say, "Why isn't it? When is there Kids Day, Mom?" And she says, "Every day is Kids Day. Every day is fuck Jed Hoyer Day." If we sound emotional, it's because we're recording this literally a minute after the end of the Tuesday Cubs day game, and it's rare that the Cubs would be on a 6-game winning streak and we both sound like we're going to cry. But we just watched Willson Contreras give an interview with Taylor McGregor where he said for the millionth time how much he loves Chicago, how much he loves the Cubs, how much they mean to him, how much he loves the fans, how much he would love to be a Cub forever, and yet he almost certainly won't be. We are coming down to the wire here. He and Happ were embracing each other and both emotional. I don't know that Happ necessarily got the same send off that Willson did, but that's also understandable. He doesn't occupy that same I think space that Willson does. But yeah, here we are. So what are your thoughts?
Yeah, it's an unfortunate bit of timing for Happ that both that his day to probably eventually be traded is coming up around the same time as Wilson's, and he also, just by his age, happened to just miss being on the 2016 team, and
Right.
got called up the next year and
Yeah.
began his career then. So it's like, we like you, we love you, and you're awesome, but you don't have access to like that part of our hearts that is kind of associated with just about everybody on the 2016 team who is not an actual piece of shit. So,
Right.
Yeah, I had a thought for a second, and oh god, I'm up in my feels again now for all this.
Well, let's start with this. Let's backtrack, right? You were at the game last night.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I had my thought. Okay.
Okay, go ahead.
So something we've heard from Willson a lot over the past couple days, especially when he's been getting like super emotional, is that he keeps repeating that he knows it's a business. And I get what he's saying there. And I get that he is showing that he understands why this is happening. And he knows the reasons behind this. And he knows it's not necessarily personal. However, it's a business is not a valid excuse. And I find that in this instance, especially, but kind of in a lot of things in general, it seems like the words "it's a business" are often used to excuse, well, we're just going to be pieces of shit right now, and we're just going to do awful things because, hey, it's business. What do you expect? And if that's the case, maybe the system that enables businesses to get away with this shit is a little bit fucked up. And maybe that's something that we got to focus on changing if we don't want to be subjected to awfulness like this, both, in a trivial sports context and in a much less trivial, worldly context. Not to, throw my anti-capitalist thoughts out here right away, but I am pinching for Kevin, so man's got to do what he's got to do. Solidarity, brother.
It's true. Well, talk to me a little bit about your experience last night. You went to the game much the way that you got to see Javi's walk-off sac fly against Amir Garrett last year, which kind of turned out to be the last moment of that Cubs team. What was the experience last night?
Yeah, it was. I actually went to the Javi walk-off, and then 2 days later, I actually went to both Rizzo and Bryant's last on-field game with the Cubs, which was the Wednesday night of that series with the Reds, because apparently there was no reason to play them the next day or give the fans, any reason to say goodbye. But yeah, that's not water under the bridge at all. But last night was a surprisingly fun night, partly because it was the first win I've seen this year in person. I'm 1-5.
There you go.
Because 2022 Cubs. And it honestly, it felt like the applause for Willson last night was a little bit muted. I was hoping to see like standing O's, and he got, bigger applause than everybody else, but it wasn't really like to the extent that it was today. So I was kind of glad to see today that everybody was kind of in tune and knew what was going on. And it felt last night that you really saw like Willson, like just on either side of that borderline that he straddles when he plays, where it's like playing with the maximum amount of emotion to be the best player he can, and also in a couple instances playing a bit out of control. There was that moment in the first inning where he reached base on a hit by pitch, and Suzuki hits the fly ball, just a routine fly ball to right field, just in front of the warning track, and you watched him and he thought, oh, he's going to try to make something happen, isn't he? And
Right.
he tried to tag and was out by 30 feet.
One of many Cubs base running gaffes last night.
Right. And yet somehow they won, because that's what happens when you play the Pirates. And that's what happens when you are the Pirates for all intents and purposes. So yeah, you could see from the first inning on that he wanted to make this a special night. And he got the double in his second at bat, and everybody gave him the big ovation at that point. And that was cool. And then I think it was a pop out to the pitcher, and then a bouncer right back to the mound were his other two at bats. And I kind of sensed maybe a little bit of frustration at the end of the night. Like he just from him, like, I wanted to do more, wanted to give you guys more. But it's the kind of thing, especially with this year's Cubs team, where it's like, we're here to show you we're here for you. We love you, regardless of what you do, because what can you do on this team?
Right, but you know what? I actually think that despite him not, hitting a home run or having some sort of bigger signature moment in that game, we did get one, and you can let me know if this is a stretch. But Scott Efros came in for the ninth, partially because David Robertson had gone 2 straight days. He also didn't pitch today, which is a little interesting. I don't know if they have a trade in the works, or if they're just trying to give him some rest. Has something broken?
I've not seen it, but the fact that they went to Givens 2 nights in a row, especially when he pitched 24 pitches last night, makes me think something is imminent. So I'm
yeah, and usually with Robertson available, that would not be a Givens. See what I did there?
Right.
But anyway, Scott Efros, who's been great all year, he pitched the ninth last night. He got his first save. But when he got the final strikeout, which was the third out, Willson was already out of his crouch and whipping the ball to second base, recording what would have been a fourth out if that were possible. And what better representation could there really be than Willson Contreras playing his ass off when it doesn't fucking matter anymore?
When the game is already over, yeah. And there was that, and then there was also the play he made pouncing on the O'Neill Cruz chopper just to the left of the mound that kind of was in no man's land, and then gunning it to first that was even less than a step ahead of Cruz to get him at first. And there was that moment that
didn't he backpick someone too?
He tried to backpick, like he got super close, and it might have been Cruz too, and might have been in the ninth, because I remember thinking, yeah, it would be wonderful to see one more backpick while he's here.
Yeah.
But that was a moment that certainly I realized, and I hope that others in the park realized too, that that's the specialness of Contreras coming out right there, because that's the gun that he wanted to display pretty much every play that he had a chance to make, including, as you remember way back in the day, that anytime there was a drop third strike, Anthony Rizzo got visibly annoyed on the field at receiving 98-mile-an-hour fastballs, howitzers right to the sternum. So I mean, that's kind of, those plays define Willson too, every bit as much as clutch home runs. It's a good
thing we never let Willson pitch in those blowouts, because he would have been trying to zing it in there at 95.
Good Lord. Like I mean, he Wilson's radar gun would put Kyle Hendricks to shame in a good way, I think. And I guess the other thing that I remember from Willson related last night too is that before the game, my dad and I checked out the Obvious shirt store a couple blocks north of the ballpark, which I hadn't been in it yet, so I wanted to see what it was like in there. And Willson had done a signing event there earlier in the day, and there were Twitter videos of Cub fans lined up and down the block. So I talked a little bit to the person working inside, asking her if she was there, and she said yes, she was, and she said he was phenomenal. That he was really kind of soft-spoken, but was engaging with everybody, wanted to make conversation with everybody in there. And what stuck out to me is that she said, of course, everybody who showed up was, showing him love and showing him the proper deference and letting him know what the past 6 years have meant to them. But she also mentioned that in addition to people who came to, get their stuff signed, there were just random Cub fans who were just walking past or standing outside the store, that were just there to say, hey, you're awesome. Wanted to let you know we love you. We're going to miss you. And she said that when he left, like he saw that, and that's what kind of broke him. That he kind of started crying on his way out, seeing that. So I imagine like his past couple days have been a parade of that. And
Yeah.
that's a lot for anybody, let alone someone who, shows emotion at the drop of a hat in many great ways as well, we know. Um, and that reminds me too, and that's this just a brief tangent. Have you ever seen Willson's reaction like 2 seconds after the final out of Game 7?
I don't know that I've seen it like isolated.
Yeah, you only kind of see it if you happen to spot it randomly, because I on a rewatching a couple years ago, I just happened to notice this, that as the final out is made and everybody is sprinting out to join the scrum in the infield, the camera kind of shows everybody running out of the dugout. And if you find Willson, like you see in that moment as he's running out, like he is already dissolved in tears.
Hmm.
Like he's the first to break down crying from the team that night. And I think that's an image that kind of also really defines like how much this meant to him, and also what he means to the emotional core of this team. That
Right.
we're about, we're about to trade because why do we need an emotional core? What good are emotions when we've got algorithms and spreadsheets? And
Yeah.
God, I sound like an 80-year
And
old.
and
But
Jan Gomes.
yeah, and Jan Gomes, the from the losing side of that particular World Series. That's the one we want to keep. Sure, why not?
Yeah, it's hard not to feel like we're belaboring this at any point because, as I'm sure you know, Kevin and I have talked about this at length, which I think it deserves to be. But I don't know what more you would look for in a player, in a teammate, in a person that Willson isn't giving you. And there continues to be this frustrating segment of Cubs Twitter that seems to revel in the past Cubs not doing so well, as if it's some sort of justification of everything having gone the way it should have gone. And even today during the game, as Willson got his ovation, I tweeted from the Away Games account at Away Games Pod, as you surely know. Seeing Willson get that ovation and just seeing the last couple of days, it's just a reminder to me that KB and Rizzo didn't even get that. And it just made me angry again. And of course, I got a tweet from someone saying, oh, so you'd rather they signed all of them and then we'd still be losing. And I was like, it's first of all, it has, well,
Yes.
well, that's okay. I don't even know if I agree with that as much. But what I replied was like, that's not what this is about. I'm just saying that they deserved a proper send off, regardless of how they're doing right now, regardless of how they do in the future. They deserved better, and we deserve better as fans. And um, like we're not, as much as we love the Cubs, none of us are delusional here. Like there's no one on earth who's sitting here saying, "Oh, you know what? The Cubs should actually be buyers this trade deadline." Obviously, that's not where they're at, and we are where we are because of a million different factors. But sure, trade Robertson, trade Givens, trade Chris Martin, trade Jan Gomes, and keep Willson Contreras. Like there are so many people that I'm completely fine with trading, even people that I have somewhat of an emotional connection with, even Happ, which I don't want the Cubs to trade Happ, but I could understand them saying, well, this is a guy who's at peak trade value. He's had his ups and downs. We don't know what the rest of his career is going to be like. If we can get something great for him right now, we want to seize that opportunity. I'm not in favor of it, but I could understand it. I don't understand how, of all of the people that we've talked about, including KB and Rizzo and Baez, that Contreras was not someone worthy of an extension when he was so explicit about wanting to be here, and honestly might have taken somewhat of a hometown deal.
Yeah, it's not even. I mean, it goes beyond just being explicit about wanting to be here and talking about how much being a Cub and playing for the fan base means to him, and playing for this team means to him. Since the beginning of this season, he has done everything in his power to make him indispensable.
Mm-hmm.
Between putting up offensive numbers that I think maybe one catcher in the league might be able to
Yeah.
match, and displaying the kind of team leadership that what defines team leadership better than that moment back in May and during Christopher Morel's walk-off sacrifice fly,
Yeah.
where he did the big gesture of take a deep breath, remember to breathe. Like and you see this over and over, Willson with guys like Morel kind of becoming that mentor figure. When you have a team that's in the middle of a big rebuilding effort, you'd think you would want like an elder statesman who kind of shows them,
Right.
okay, this is how we play on the big league level. This is how we expect things to be done. Someone whose defense, other than bullshit framing numbers, has been fine, has been better than fine in many instances, and the team hasn't even approached him. That
Well,
shows.
because the problem is, and this is not surprising given what we know about the Ricketts and about Jed Hoyer. Yeah, Willson has made himself indispensable, but he's also made himself a valuable person to trade.
Yep. Yeah.
And
That's
that
how they
doesn't
view
mean
players.
that, yeah, and that doesn't mean that I'm, you know, the only reason Kyle Hendricks might not get traded is because he's been injured and up and down this year.
Yeah.
Otherwise, he'd
How
be gone
sick is
too.
that? How
Yeah.
sick is that? That my favorite Cub pitcher of all time is Kyle Hendricks. Again, filling in for Kevin, got to say that, but also true for in my instance. And at one point this year, I had the thought that when he went down with the injury, I'm like, well, thank God, then he can't be traded. Like that's the reaction to Kyle Hendricks having a season-ending injury at this point. And
it is the only thing that would prevent Willson from being traded is him breaking his leg tomorrow.
Right. And at this point, the way that Jed Hoyer operates this team, this is the second year in a row where the team, and this is stuff we all know, of course, but in the third largest market in baseball, one of, maybe the 4 most popular franchises in the league, a team that you open up the gates and you will draw guaranteed 2.5 to 2.8 million fans a year, own TV network. We all know this. And it's the second year in a row that we're approaching the trade deadline by out-pirating the Pirates.
Mm-hmm.
And under Jed Hoyer, we've gone from like the core that we were so emotionally attached to, and now we're being force-fed the idea that we have to view every player as transitory and as an asset. And I don't know about you, that's not how I fan. That's not how.
No.
And rooting for laundry makes for a clever Jerry Seinfeld punchline from 30 years ago. Mm-hmm. It's a god-awful fan ethos. And another thing, then you kind of referenced this in what you just talked about, that this experience and last year's experience has kind of shown us, is that there is a sizable rot in this fan base. And it's anybody who, you can tell anybody who has unironically used the hashtag Jed's League as if saying, I embrace this Tampa Bay Rays business consultant bullshit way of team construction. This is the team I want to root for. And what pleasure do you get out of that, other than that, I don't even know. Like,
right. And I think it makes it all the more difficult because the Cubs core, with some notable exceptions, was a group of intensely likable people. Mm-hmm. Right. So I don't understand why it brings people joy to see them traded, mm-hmm. or to see them not succeeding or dealing with injuries now. I'll never understand that, because how does a team that made all of our dreams come true not deserve the the reverence that we gave them? And of course it's true that folks like you and I and Kevin at times are like, have been probably more lenient with the people that we love and their performance because of what they did for us. But we're also recording this as someone like Kyle Schwarber has 30 home runs. So like, right. We're not crazy.
Yeah. And I think part of the rejoicing in what they feel is the failure of the core is also kind of a poor reading of what the way stats are kind of kept in the current game. That, it's been a bad year for Hobby, no question about that. There's nothing mm-hmm. that I can say to dress that up. And KB has been injured, but he's been hitting well since he's been back from the back injury. Yeah. Rizzo and Schwarber both have bad batting averages, and that's not nothing. But in the current context of the game, where the entire league is hitting 241, 242, right. You look at the power numbers that they both been able to put up, and you're talking, weighted runs created pluses in the 120s, and I think Schwarber might even be in the 130s at this
Yeah.
point. Those are incredibly valuable guys. You talk to Yankee fans, our mutual friend Chris Calogero, the biggest and nicest Yankee fan I know, texted me just kind of out of the blue 3 weeks ago, just saying, "Hey, I know this probably hurts to say, but loving Rizzo, I think he's great." And so it's pretty clear to the team he's been traded to that
Right.
Anthony Rizzo has value still. And just from a my own personal standpoint too, in terms of the Cubs end of these trades, what's interesting to me is that, and this might be just my own personal like vendetta against the team president playing out, but anytime one of the prospects that we get from the trades is mentioned, like in the context of like Pete Crow Armstrong going off in Double-A, or Canario, I guess is the one who just had the incredible week this past week. And honestly, I have a hard time giving a shit. Like,
Yeah.
I'm sure when they come up and they perform great, I'll have no problem cheering them on. Christopher Morel has been a joy this year. He's been just about my favorite one to watch of the new Cubs. But I can't generate an excitement that isn't there. And I have none for any of these guys. Like it does not
Right.
even come close. It's not even in the same area code as the way it was when we were talking about Rizzo coming up in 2012, and then Bryant drafted right behind him, and then Schwarber behind him, and
Right.
Baez. And
Well, but here's the difference, right? Because in that case, it was like we have to tear everything down. There is like a rot within this organization that is long standing, and the only way to do that is to tear everything down and rebuild it from nothing. In this case, it was already built, and then we tore it down to try to build it again.
yeah,
So I think it becomes more frustrating that way, where so much of this just didn't feel necessary, and there are all these weird ripple effect, butterfly effect moments. And Kevin and I always talk about the fact that 2018 was the turning point, right? You have what felt like an up and down year, but what was a very good year, 95 wins. The team doesn't win a playoff game; they get bounced in 2 games. They don't do anything. They could have signed Bryce Harper, and um, it's hard for me to imagine a scenario where all of this feels worth it in retrospect. And I think our friend Sarah Sanchez tweeted something kind of similar to this, which is like, even if the Cubs somehow win a World Series in the next 5 years, which seems incredibly improbable, but even if they do, it's hard for me to imagine looking back and being like, oh, I get it now. Like this, everything is fine because we ended up winning.
mhm.
Um, I don't know, man. It's and after, like, even though I am mentally prepared for it, especially after last year, I know that when we do see that tweet from Buster Olney or whoever the fuck it is saying like Willson Contreras has been traded to blah blah, like it's still going to crush me, and
Mhm. Yeah,
it's not. There's no way it's not going to.
it should. I mean, one of the worst parts of that ordeal last year at the trade deadline was because I had such a visceral emotional response to the Rizzo trade. It felt like I almost wasn't giving KB or Javi like the proper amount of mourning, because then it was just like that sense of numbness of, oh my God, just how much more can you pile on at this point?
Right.
And I think now that we've had kind of a year to process all that, I think it's a compliment to Willson and to what he means that we're going to have that emotional response all over again. It's not going to feel good. It's not a compliment he wants, I hope, but
Hmm.
nonetheless, I think it's kind of underscores what he's meant to us and to most of the right thinking fan base anyway. Um,
I ask you this not with any expectation that it will happen, but if the Cubs pull a 2016 Yankees and they trade Willson and they get a nice package for him and then they re-sign him to a long contract after this season, would you be okay with them having traded him now?
if they resign him after the offseason,
Yeah,
I, I will be shocked and I will be thrilled. Yes.
yeah,
I have to think like the kind of thing the 2016 Yankees pulled is like, feels like a once in a decade kind of move where that happens. But I mean, Willson has talked openly about that he would be open to doing that. The problem with that is that just from like the things you hear from the Jed friendly media uh, in Chicago, there's one host in particular on the Score, Matt Spiegel,
Mhm.
who seems to be the first to want to spout Jed friendly talking points, which either means his sources want someone in the front office or he just agrees with everything Jed does. And either way, go fuck yourself, Matt Spiegel. Um, but uh, he, right around Willson's, like at the apex of his year offensively, when everybody was really clamoring, okay, let's get this extension done, let's hammer something out. He was the one going on the radio and saying, well, so I, from the people I talked to in the Cub front office, they look at Willson as a defensive liability or something of that nature. Like he really emphasized that the front office has their doubts about Willson defensively, and in the middle of Willson putting together an all-star year like almost no other catcher was doing in the league right now.
I mean,
So
that just makes them sound stupid if they really
yeah,
think that.
stupid and petty. But I have to think if that's what Matt Spiegel is hearing from his Jed sources, then I have to think that's how the Cub front office views Willson. And so, yeah, I can't get my hopes up, unfortunately.
I mean, if you could sign any catcher in Major League Baseball, there are how many catchers are better than Willson Contreras? Like,
Uh, yeah,
I'm having a hard time thinking of who I would rather want.
at this point, yeah. I mean,
I mean, Sal Perez is injured and
Alejandro Kirk
old.
overall having a better year
Yeah,
than
I don't
him.
know. Like, it's
Uh,
just it's
Jose Trevino was good on the mic in the All-Star game, I guess. So maybe that counts for something. But
yeah.
yeah, and catching, especially now, like it's so incredibly rare to find a catcher who is an offensive weapon, offensively
Hmm.
competent, let alone an offensive weapon. Like,
Right.
and understandably, so many teams, because there's so much involved in the catcher's game, are willing to make offensive sacrifices. But if you don't have to do that, if you have one of those rare guys who you can say, okay, this deepens our lineup even more, why wouldn't you want to keep that around? It's
Also, especially given the way that the NL has changed, just rules wise,
mhm.
you could have Wilson fresh for so much longer, knowing that you can DH him 30, 40 times a year.
Yeah, you've seen the benefits of that. And then even at some point, if you have to move him off catcher, that he's still an offensive weapon anywhere he plays. Like that's someone who's going
Yeah.
to still put up your 20 to 25 home runs, get on base at a 350 clip, something like that. In this era, yeah, for God's sake.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I mean, it almost doesn't even feel worth discussing the fact that the Cubs are on a 6-game winning streak. I will say that it's always, as someone who grew up around a lot of Philly sports fans, who some of them are very nice people, but in general, Philly sports fans not so great. Very satisfying to watch the Cubs sweep the Phillies in Philadelphia, knowing that the Phillies really need to win those games. They're like a
Mhm.
game out of the wild card. And got absolutely trounced most of the weekend. I mean, I guess Saturday was a closer game until the Cubs ran away at the end. But I mean, Friday was just an absolute shellacking. Nelson Velasquez going deep a couple times. Like there was some fun stuff, and there is and has been some fun stuff even with a bad Cubs team. But it just feels like almost pointless to talk about any of this.
Yeah, yeah. It really felt like Philly almost wasn't in the mood for showing up after the All-Star break, which is
Yeah,
weird for a
strange.
team that's that close to contention. And yeah, at a certain point, like all the Cubs had to do was put enough balls in play and eventually wait for them to throw one away or airmail
Oh
a
my
cutoff.
God, their third baseman Bohm is so bad.
Ooh,
I've seen,
yeah.
I had heard that, and I'd seen kind of some compilations of him earlier this year. I think there was, I think there was a clip earlier this year where he had made like maybe 2 or 3 errors in an inning, and then as he was walking off the field, you could read his lips saying, "I fucking hate this place."
Yes, yes, he was that guy. And
Yeah,
and I mean, that's an honest reaction. And that's, I would venture to guess at
yeah.
certain points during the year, almost everybody who plays for Philadelphia has that because the fans take pride in that. And as I will say every time, when you're the fan base that booed Mike Schmidt his entire career, maybe the problem isn't the players.
Yeah, well, and we also saw our pal Big Stick Nick getting into it with a reporter who did ask a stupid question. Let's just call it what it is. I mean, the
Right.
guy asked him, "Did you hear the booze?" If you're gonna ask a question about the booze, ask it the way a journalist would ask it. Nick, I'm sure you noticed some fans booing during your final at bat. What's your reaction to that? That's how you phrase a question if you're a fucking professional. I have
Right.
no problem with Castellanos responding that way.
Right. But yeah, oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, Philly media is just Philly fans who happen to get paid to be Philly fans for the most part. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's something you call an Angelo at WIP in the mornings and bitch about. But yeah, it's I mean Nick Castellanos is going to give you honest answers to when you ask him a question, and that's something that we all liked about him in the short time he was here. So
Yeah.
yeah, in Philly, sometimes that gets you in a bit of trouble until you walk somebody off and then become the hero again, because fans are the best.
So we'll wrap this up here soon. I don't think we have that much more to say, but if and when the Cubs do inevitably sell off everyone, including Contreras and Happ, probably, how much do you see yourself watching this team the last 2 months of the season?
Oh God, it's tough
Maybe
to
the
say.
Field of Dreams game.
I'm actually gonna be playing bocce during the Field of Dreams game, so I'm gonna
Ah,
have to give that. I mean, they're playing it in Davenport, Iowa, with teams that essentially are the Iowa Cubs and the Cedar Rapids Colonels. So I guess
mhm.
kind of appropriate for that location. Uh, but yeah, I remember back to last year. I think because it was such a shocking moment to me that it was so like everybody being traded at the same time that I didn't really watch him for most of August before
Yeah.
kind of getting back on board a bit in September. This year, it'll drop off again. I don't think it'll be like a month-long boycott, just because I mean they've been telegraphing this from the start. Um,
Right.
but yeah, it's not going to be like they've not been appointment television for the entire year, and they're going to be even less so in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I'm gonna get to see Cincinnati, which is a ballpark I've not yet gotten to see, and I think it's like the game after the Field of Dreams game. So they play on Thursday, then they have an off day, and then they play on that Saturday.
And
And
even less important Cubs Reds game.
yeah,
Wow.
I'm already shuddering at the notion of what that Cubs team is gonna be like. But I guess on the bright side, when you're seeing a new stadium for the first time, I won't have to feel like I need to stay in my seat the whole time to be
Mhm.
locked in on a team that's gonna lose 100 games.
Yeah, and there's a river right across the way in case you need a place to jump after the game. So
I might just sadly walk into the river. I think that's as good a place to
you'd be
end as any. Ken, tell us about anything you would like to promote. Any articles, any places to follow you? What do you got going on?
yes. First off, being me, I have to say the Virginia Wolf ending to a Cubs game would be kind of perfect this year. That's got to throw at least one literary reference
Oh,
your way.
please, of course.
Um, yes, so outsports.com is always the place to find my writing. This past week, just yesterday actually went live. I did a story where I got to interview an alumni, I believe. My Latin is always
Alumnus.
alumnus. Yes, give me 3 times, I might get the Latin right. From the All-American Girls Professional Baseball League named Maybelle Blair, who played for the Peoria Red Wings in 1948. And
Wow.
yeah, and she is an advisor for the upcoming League of Their Own TV series based on the
Hmm.
movie. And it premiered at Tribeca last month. So she was part of a panel for that. And just kind of in the middle of the panel, kind of out of nowhere, age 95 came out to everybody.
Holy shit.
Yeah, it's a clip that went viral. Like you just see her just kind of just mentioning as if it were completely casual that it's first time in 75, 85 years, letting you know I'm out. And the crowd takes a second to realize what happens and bursts into a gigantic burst of applause. And I
Wow.
got to talk to her last week. She is at 95, just a ball of energy. Someone who is as devoted to keeping the history of the AAGPPL alive as Buck O'Neill was to the Negro Leagues. And so I talked to her about coming out and kind of her story about it. It was a joy. And so I've got a piece
Incredible.
on Outsports about that right now, and check it out, outsports.com.
Amazing. Well, we will certainly retweet that from the Away Games account if we haven't already. As for us over here, Kevin will hopefully be back in the mix next week as we approach The trade deadline, who knows what will have happened between now and then. Maybe David Robertson will be traded in 5 minutes. Who can say? But that is it for us. Follow us at Away Games Pod on Twitter and Instagram. You know where to follow Kevin and myself. Make sure to buy my comedy album, Statistically More Relatable, if you have not done so yet. And that is all for us. We will see you next time.